Welcome back to Local Decision 2020. I'm Rusty Ray. We're joined now by candidate for Blaine City Council out of Ward 1. It's Jason Smith. Jason, good to see you again.
Good to see you.
You're coming back again and again. You were just here a couple months ago.
Yep, made it through primary, so now we get to talk about general.
That's right. And what's that been like since the primary? What are you continuing some of the same activity, trying to reach people, talk to people? Has anything changed in the way you're approaching it?
Nothing really changed in the way I approached it. Took a week or two break to absorb primary and then kind of get set for general. But still trying to do outreach and get to people and make myself available, online and however possible, and making phone calls.
Is it different in knowing that you would be seeking to replace, or is it not different or not replace, but someone who's stepping out and retiring, I should say?
Yeah,
and filling that role. Is there a difference in running that kind of a race or not?
I think it's a little bit because you're not trying to challenge someone else's record and what they've done. You don't have to have that conversation. A little bit easier for incumbent to talk about what they have done and not, whereas
Right.
This race, it's neither of us have been in the city council spot, so it's about what our priorities are for the city. So I think it changes the conversation a little bit.
What are you hearing from folks about the city's response to COVID? I mean, cities can only do so much, obviously, in terms of regulations, but there's a lot of room for cities to work with their businesses and to allow certain things or make certain things easier and stay open for business and provide services. What are people saying to you about that?
I think for the most part, people have been very positive. I think the city responded very quickly with trying to be flexible, with restaurants and whatnot, of trying to make it easier for them to do outdoor seating spaces and things like that. And then now they're trying to do the outreach with the funds that they got from the CARES Act to try and help local businesses. It's a very tall task to try and allocate the limited funds they do have, to the various businesses and try and help them out and ensure that can help them bridge this difficult time.
From your perspective, do you feel like the city has had to put anything on hold because it had to address these immediate concerns and therefore maybe stuff got pushed back, or is there anything of that you felt needs to be addressed sooner rather than later?
No, nothing that I think they need to address sooner. I think the priority is in the right place. COVID is here and now, and they have to react to that. The next difficult thing is what to do with the budget. I know that they're looking at City Hall renovations were already in place, and they had the bonding, so they looked at, can we hold off that? But you actually can't, because you have to spend your bonding money. So they're kind of working through those situations of where they can defer work and not. So I think the priority is in the right place.
In the materials you submitted that we have provided at northmetrotv.com for as many of the candidates that we can have those submit, you identified, I think, 3 things that you really wanted to work on. And the first thing you identified was transparency and, I guess, communication with city council members. Can you say more about that? Can you say specifically if there's anything that concerns you about the way it is now, or what you would do differently as a member of city council in terms of that communication with the people that you serve?
Sure. That's a great question. I think it's getting more of the communication out. I think the city does a good job of publishing information, so if people want to go and find out what the city is doing, they can do it, but I think there needs to be a little bit more outreach to various communities. Not everybody's familiar with all the areas you can go look. I think they send the newsletter to everybody, and that's a great place. But to go meet people where they are and drive that conversation, make everybody in the community feel welcome in Blaine and understand what resources are available. So drive that communication, and also make it very clear that city council is people's entrance into the city. We're the only council is the only people that are elected in city government, and so that's how people can drive their voice by what they want to see happen. They ask the city councilors, and it's the city council's job to represent their interest in the city and ensure that drives the direction the city is going.
So maybe if people had a better idea of when a public hearing is, or what the steps were through planning and zoning and then through city council for, let's say, a new development or a project like that. We've seen that recently with an event center that was proposed at Main Street in Lexington. And people came out and said, no, we really don't want this. So that is when it works, and people who are fired up about something in a small area can come out and check that out. But you just say it's more about educating people about these are the steps and this is how you can be a part of the process.
Right, and that felt a little late, is that people had to come out, and it was via the right process, but it'd be outreach before that. So it doesn't have to come to the planning, and planning doesn't have to hear 2 hours of people. That you could have a discussion about what it is and what they want to do, and the residents can give their feedback. There was a lot of good feedback about why that space didn't make sense at that intersection. It was the way that things are laid out. I think that's a lot of the opportunity for the city going forward, is engaging residents and saying, okay, here's how the thing's zoned, here's where we're trying to attract businesses. What are your concerns, so that it doesn't get to an event space having to do all that planning and all work. I feel bad for the business and business development as well. They're trying to get businesses in and doing their best. And then the residents are pushing back. You don't want to make that an adversarial thing. You'd like everybody to be involved up front. So that's kind of more of the outreach and making the transparent. So before it gets to the formal steps is engaging people and making sure everybody is heard and those concerns are known.
And you, as a council member, would try to be as responsive as you could and available and able to be reached as possible.
Yeah. And try and help people understand that process. When my first interaction with the city was around a zoning thing, and trying to understand how that process works when you're not coming from within the city and very intimately familiar with how that zoning works. It's very dense and hard to get through all that material. So I think some of city council's job and staff's job is to help educate the residents on here's how the process works, here's how we can take in your feedback, here's how things are zoned and what that actually means and what's allowed.
Something else you wrote about that again is at northmetrotv.com is a way of generating revenue for the city and paying attention to the number of visitors that in a normal year would be coming to Blaine for National Sports Center, and then of course the golf course and 3M Open. People are coming here, they may stay here or at least eat here and spend other money here. Is there a way you think to raise revenue through the visitors to Blaine?
Yes, that would be one thing. Is right now Blaine's main revenue is just on property taxes, which is most cities' primary revenue. But Blaine, when people think of Blaine, and you asked that last time, what do people know as Blaine? I checked everybody's answers, and everybody answered the same thing. It's TPC and NSC, and so there's a lot of things that people are coming here to Blaine for and using the resources that we have within the city and the parks and stuff. But Blaine does nothing to kind of capture that revenue from the additional resources that we put into things like ensuring that TPC goes off well and that NSC has the resources they do. So how can you do things like maybe ticket fees or things like that?
Or like an accommodations tax? Or
accommodations tax, the hotel tax. Blaine takes in virtually no money in hotel taxes.
Would that be a tough adjustment? Would that be a tough sell for any sector of who all is involved in that, or not, do you think?
I think there's a discussion to be had. And certainly if I owned a hotel, you'd want to push back. But I think it's fairly normal in most regions for there to be a hotel tax. And Blaine is the outstander in that we don't have those kinds of things and fees that help fund the city that puts on those things. And the other place to get finance is just the grant program. So there's local, state, and federal grants. And as long as you can ensure the grants are consistent with where you're headed and you're not tying yourself to something long-term you don't want to be. An example would be like parks. There are a lot of park grants, and it does take resources to go after and write and pursue that grant money. But that's money that we're kind of leaving on the table right now that other cities do pursue and get.
It sounds like you think that Blaine perhaps is in a unique position to pursue these types of revenue streams. Again, there is a tourism element in Blaine that in other cities, even in Anoka County, and in some cases in the Twin Cities region, that's not necessarily the case because of the amount of visitors that come.
Right, and that's what Blaine is known for, and rightly so. It's a great place to be. That's why many of us choose to live here, is we have things like the NSC and TPC. But that brings in visitors, which you don't want to make that your primary source of revenue. It's not like we're a tourism town, but it would be nice to get something back for what you put into having those places do. NSC is great and it's a state resource, but it also locks up a lot of Blaine land that would otherwise be some other thing. That's tax exempt land. So Blaine doesn't see any money from that land being dedicated to the NSC. In
the short term, should you win a seat on city council and take over in the new year, there's going to be some really hard times with the budget. Already a budget shortfall was identified, but expected revenue down because of COVID and because of people not out spending the same money the same ways in the same places. So do you see some challenges ahead if you should win right away to make some hard decisions with the budget? Yes, you can explore these things we just talked about down the road, but right away it seems like there might be some tough decisions. Yeah, that doesn't solve the near term, kind of shortfalls from everything shutting down. I think every city is dealing with that and finding a way to deal with it. So you shut down the optional things you can, the Parks and Rec. But people, the hard thing about shutting down the parks now or not supporting those is right now is when people are most out using them because, that's what's close and accessible.
So there'll be some very, very difficult choices about how do you rectify the budget, short term and long term, and not shortchange yourself long term and making just the cuts now to match the budget money available.
Do you think there's any more opportunities in Blaine for more mass transit? I mean, you've got some park and ride facilities, you've got the bus station near Northtown Mall, but are there any other opportunities to pursue there to try to get Met Council interested in maybe, especially if Highway 65 is eventually approved and some easier access there, maybe there could be some more bus lines or something like that. Do you think that that would be something that the city of Blaine could help pursue with Met Council?
I do think it makes sense for the city to pursue with Met Council. I mean, one of the nice benefits of Blaine is the access to 35, and for people that are working downtown. Granted, things are going to be much different post-COVID of where people are transporting, but that's a great corridor, to add additional mass transit. We have the bus station now, but what are the alternatives and where else would it make sense? If you get 65 in better shape where traffic actually flows, could that become a corridor?
What roles can the city play with 65? It's a state project, and the state is taking it on and now actually trying to solicit ideas from residents and people who drive it, looking at ideas and watching some things on the computer to see, okay, this is how this intersection might work. But the city can do things in concert with that, do you think, to help improve the situation once a plan is put in place?
So the great thing is for everybody to give their feedback on what they want it to look like, but ultimately it becomes a project and it needs funding, and that currently doesn't exist. What Blaine can do is advocate at the state and federal level and partner with others that are on 65, so Ham Lake and then south of us, Spring Lake Park, to try and combine efforts to try and lobby, how important, and explain how important this project is, and ensure that money is placed in from the state from bonding, and Blaine will contribute what they can, but this is really a county road, and the state and county will be the primary drivers of funding. But Blaine, it greatly impacts us, so they need to kind of make the voice heard and ensure that other people know who to talk to, who's your state rep, who's your senator, to go ahead and make sure that people know who to talk to and ask and expect that to see support for bonding for that project.
One of our reporters, Mike, was out talking to people who live in the new developments off of Lexington and Maine and that eastern edge of the city, and the person said to Mike, when I go to the park, it's always, well, how long have you lived here? How long have you? And there's a lot of new people to Blaine in that area. What do you think that area is going to look like in 10 years, especially along Lexington Avenue? There's still some opportunities for different kinds of development out there. What do you think it will look like? And will much more activity in Blaine be there economically and otherwise?
I think that's where Blaine has a lot of its development opportunity, because that's some of the open land. I think that they did Lexington hopefully in a way that will be able to take that traffic, but that's where I think some of the development could shift. There could be more businesses over there right now. I mean, you have Pheasant Ridge, which is to the south, but those developments are a fair bit south, so I think you could start to see more businesses want to come in, and Blaine needs to make sure that they've zoned and thought through how the traffic is going to flow. So I do think that could be another kind of hub of Blaine. That'll be the newest area. Most families there are new, and they'll want to see shopping by them and things like that. And hopefully Blaine can zone for that and plan for what that growth looks like and be thoughtful about how we grow.
Okay. Jason Smith, thank you so much for coming by again.
Yes, thank you.
All right.